Tonight, we continue in Revelation. We're in Revelation chapter 4. So if you got your Bible or if you're in our app, you can go to the notes there. There's a lot of notes there. I have no idea how much of this we're going to be able to cover. There's a lot in this chapter. I'll just kind of tell you, in my study of Revelation, I've been studying Revelation for years, but I'm digging in really, really deep for you guys to make sure I'm getting everything out of it that I can. And what I'm learning is that every word, every phrase is loaded with information that I could spill to you. So I kind of have to be selective in how much we cover here. But so what I'm going to do is we're going to go through chapter 4. Hopefully we can make it all the way through chapter 4, and we'll cover chapter 5 next week. But we're going to kind of go through this, and I'm going to show you how connected to the Old Testament this is. So chapter 4 has got a ton of Old Testament in it. Every chapter of Revelation is filled with the Old Testament. So I'm going to try to show you some of those connections. And then by the end tonight, we're going to talk about the application. So what we're about to see is John, who's on the island of Patmos, is about to receive the second vision. And I'll explain why I'm calling it the second in just a minute. So he's about to be able to see into heaven, and he's going to see what's going on up there. So what he sees, we can learn something from. So that's where I'm going to try to tie that in at the end tonight when we get to the application part. I want to show you what can we learn from what John saw, because unfortunately, we don't get to just get zapped up to heaven to look around for a while and come back and write it down for everybody. Now, there's a lot of people claiming that they've done that. There's plenty of books out there that you can go buy where someone went to heaven and looked around. There's one lady specifically on the internet that's got bright neon pink hair, and she goes to heaven like whenever she wants to, apparently. And she gets to go to Easter land where the Easter bunnies are teaching children how to paint and all that. And she claims to be a prophet. And I just think maybe she's eating too many mushrooms. But anyway, so we don't get to do that like John did. So how are we supposed to apply what he saw? So I'm going to try to do that for you by the end, but we got to work our way through this. It's 11 verses. For Revelation, that means that's a lot of information because every phrase, every sentence is loaded. Now, let me kind of give you a quick overview of these visions, because this kind of helps us see how the book of Revelation has been organized, how John organized it when he wrote it down. Revelation was not something that, at least I don't believe, John wrote this in one sitting. I think that he spent a lot of time thinking about what he saw and putting it down in a way that made sense to people who knew their Bible really well. So what I want to do is show you how this is organized. Now, you've seen this before. This is a lot, okay? This is kind of hard to take in, all right? And understand that. What I was trying to do is just break the whole book apart and put it all on one slide to try to simplify the book, but this isn't very simple, is it? So I found another way that's very helpful, and I didn't know this until the last year or so when I was digging a little bit deeper. But Revelation is organized by 4 main visions. Now, when you read Revelation, you're going to be like, there's way more than 4 visions in here. And there are, but there's four places where he tells us this begins a new vision. So the first one is the Son of Man, which we've already went through that one. That was chapters 1 through 3. In chapter 1, he sees Jesus, and he looks like a priest, but he also looks like a warrior, right? So he's like a high priest, but also a warrior. And the way he communicates all this kind of seems like Jesus is about to show up and kick some butt, right? So that's in chapter 1. Chapters 1 through 3 is all one vision. It's where he sees Jesus, and then Jesus says, okay, to this church, I want you to write this down. To this church, I want you to write this down. And he goes through those 7 churches, right? We're all on the same page? Okay, so that's vision number 1. That's the vision of the Son of Man. That's Jesus. We're about to begin vision 2, which these are my titles that I put on these, okay? But I call this the vision of judgment. So this one is really long. It goes from chapter 4, we're going to start tonight. It goes all the way to chapter 16. Now, the way that you tell that John is shifting gears or he's leaving one vision to start a new set of visions is he will say, and I was in the Spirit, or and the angel carried me away in the Spirit. Okay, so that's your indicator in Revelation that something, that we've got a transition. Okay, so you'll see that as we keep going. We're about to see it here in chapter 4. So you've got the vision of judgment. This is going to be, he sees heaven going on. This is chapter 4 and 5. And the big scroll comes out. It's got 7 seals on it. And it's a judgment scroll. We'll get to that next week. And Jesus is going to start opening the seals on the scroll. And then that's going to go all the way through chapter 16. So you're going to have the seals, the trumpets, and the bowls all in 7s. And this is in the app, by the way. If you're looking in our app, this image should be in there. I hope it is. And then there are these little interludes, or I guess you could call them like a break, that'll be in between certain things. It's almost like, it seems like the subject got changed. So we're going to cover those in the future. But all that's in this judgment vision. It's all bad news, that all these bad things are about to start happening, okay? And then there's the victory vision. That's what I call it, because this is when Jesus and God's people win the battles. So that covers all kinds of stuff. We'll get to that when we get to it. And then the 4th vision is the vision of new creation. So in chapter 21, he'll say it for the last time. He'll say, and he carried me away in the Spirit and showed me the new Jerusalem and the new heavens and the new earth. So anyway, I just wanted to show you that because in my mind at least, that categorizes big sections of the book and I can digest them a little bit better. So hopefully that helps you. So when you're reading along and you say, and I was in the Spirit, just circle that. Okay, something new's started here. We've got a transition. So that's kind of how you can follow that. Hopefully that helps. And then obviously there's, the beginning and the end of the book are not visions. They're whole different things going on there. So anyway, all right, so we're about to begin vision number 2. We're going to go to heaven tonight. Y'all want to go to heaven? You always wanted to be there. You just don't want to go now, right? Like, who wrote that song? Everybody wants to go to heaven. Nobody wants to go now. All right, y'all don't know your music. Okay. It's a country song, wasn't it? Anyway, who cares? It doesn't matter. Y'all don't listen to country. Y'all probably listen to 88.1 all the time, don't you? Same 10 songs all day long. Anyway, we'll cut that out of the video. Knocking the Christian station here. Okay, now the next thing we need to understand before we get into this vision, and hopefully you did this. I gave you some homework, but it was a couple weeks ago, so you probably forgot and didn't do it. But if you read Revelation chapter 4, and then you go read the Mount Sinai story in Exodus 19 and Exodus 24, and then you go back and you read Revelation 4, and then you go back and read Exodus 19. Are you getting what I'm saying? You just keep doing that, you'll notice there's a lot of similar things going on. So what I did is I did that work for you because I was pretty sure you wouldn't. So this is what we're about to read about. Remember, Jesus' voice in chapter 1 sounds like a trumpet. It's loud like a trumpet. The Son of Man was speaking to me like a loud trumpet. Well, that's going to happen again in chapter 4. And then John's going to get called up. Jesus is actually going to say, come up here. Right? It's like Scorpion from Mortal Kombat. Y'all probably don't know what that is either because you don't know pop culture at all, apparently. So he's going to call him up to heaven. Well, that's exactly what God did with Moses, right? And by the way, God's voice sounds like a loud trumpet blast at Mount Sinai. So you see the connection? And it actually goes in the same order, pretty much. John's going to see the throne of God and all these fancy jewels, like jasper and carnelian and all this stuff, and like a sea of glass and all that. He's going to see all these jewels. Well, if you keep reading in Exodus, when the high priest is described, he's got these jewels on this breastplate. Some of the same jewels mentioned there are mentioned in Revelation, and then mentioned again in Revelation 21 in the New Jerusalem. So you see how the thread just keeps going, goes from Exodus all the way through to the end of Revelation. John's going to see some elders up in heaven sitting on thrones. Well, at Mount Sinai, there were elders there. Now, let me draw you so you can kind of get a mental picture of Mount Sinai, because sometimes when we read the story, we don't notice this. At least I didn't for a long time. So let me zoom in so I can draw it bigger. So you have, why is this not working? Well, wouldn't you know? Oh, it's because I was drawing in black. Can't draw in black on black. How about that? Huh. All right. So we're going to say this is a mountain. Okay, the top of the mountain up here. Now, at Mount Sinai, I don't want to spend too much time on this because I like to geek out on this, but at Mount Sinai, there's like 3 levels going on, and you have to read real close and try to picture it in your mind to notice it. But all the people of Israel, just your everyday Israelites, they're all down here at the bottom. So you got the people of Israel. Okay? You can't read my writing anyway. All right, now about halfway up the mountain are the elders and the priest. They're like halfway up the mountain, and God calls Moses to go up to the top of the mountain, and that's where God's presence is. And it's crazy, like it's fire and smoke and lightning and all this stuff, and that's why the POI, the people of Israel, that's why they want to stay at the bottom. Now God had told them, when I tell you, y'all come up the mountain, we're going to have a meeting. We're going to do a covenant. We're going to get married, so to speak. You're going to be my people. I'm going to be your God. That's how this is going to go. But they were scared, and you would be too, when there's lightning and thunder and his voice is so loud it sounds like a trumpet blast. And when you think trumpet, don't think Louis Armstrong. Like, not that. Like loud battle trumpet. That's what you need to think. So loud that it quakes the mountain. You'd probably want to stay at the bottom too and say, yeah, Moses, you go. How about you go talk to God, come back and tell us what he said. So that's kind of how that whole scene plays out. But you see a 3-tiered thing, right? And Moses is called into that fiery presence of God. This is why the Israelites, after 40 days of waiting on Moses, they think, he's dead. He went into the fire. Like, he's got to be dead. And that's why they make a golden calf and, all that stuff. So you see this 3-tiered approach. This is the same design that the tabernacle is in. You've got the outer court, you've got the holy place, and you got the most holy place where God's fiery presence is, right? So you see this, and it kind of gets traced all the way through. So that's what's going on at Sinai. So you've got elders, and I'm probably going to mess this up if I keep. Okay, just stop touching that. All right. So you've got elders present. They're about halfway up the mountain. But in John's vision, they're not halfway up. They're actually sitting on thrones around God. So that was probably in his mind. This is a new picture. There's humans up here. Because remember, before Jesus came and did what he did, nobody gets to go directly to heaven. Right? Remember Sheol, the place, the kind of like the holding place that's where your spirit goes, and you would stay there. But now, John is going to see humans sitting on thrones like they're rulers or judges in heaven. So for an Israelite, which is what John is, that's going to mean something to him. Like, wait a minute, the rules have changed. We don't go down there first. We go directly up here. Does that make sense? Okay. So there's elders there. There's lightning and quaking and fire in both passages. And when the elders are on the mountain in Sinai, they look up and they said it looked like a pavement of like crystal, clear crystal that was underneath God's feet, so to speak. So they're on the mountain, they're looking up, and it's like there's this clear barrier. It's exactly what John sees. He sees a sea that looks like glass all around the throne. So I think it's pretty safe to say, when we read Revelation chapter 4, we're supposed to go back and read the Sinai story. That's going to help us understand. We meditate on the word day and night. We compare things back and forth. This is how the word gets into our heart and changes us. It helps us to understand, and how the Spirit leads us to more understanding. Okay? Sound good? All right, you ready to read the Bible? I just had to dump that on you. You can go have fun with it in your own time. But all right, here we go. After this, okay, we got to stop right there. After what? After the first vision, the vision of the Son of Man, right? Okay, so after this, I looked, and behold, a door standing open in heaven. What do you think John's going to be thinking when he sees that? Heaven's open. Now, up to this point, up until everything Jesus has done, death, burial, and resurrection, heaven is for God. Heaven's for God and all these spiritual beings that he created, like the cherubim and the seraphim and the angels, right? That's who's up there. Humans don't just get to walk into heaven. The door's not open. But now it is. That's what John's going to be thinking. There's a door standing open in heaven. There's an exclamation point in our English Bibles. That's not there in the Greek. But the force of the word in the grammar of the Greek implies this was surprising. Wow. There's a door open. We get to go into heaven. Make sense? So I want you to be in John's head as we read through this. All right, a door standing open in heaven. And the first voice which I had heard speaking to me like a trumpet, whose voice was that? That was Jesus, Son of Man, chapter 1, right? He said, "Come up here, and I will show you what must take place after this." Okay, so you've got after this here, you've got after this here. All right, those are connected. So what's going on here? Well, he sees a door standing open in heaven. Now, I believe that Revelation was written before the Gospel of John was written. The Gospel of John was actually written toward the end of John's life. Revelation was written before AD 70. That's my opinion. A lot of scholars believe that, but scholars are divided. We've talked about that before. Either way, do you remember a time in John's Gospel where Jesus makes these I am statements? Like, I am the good shepherd. If you've read Gospel of John, you'll notice this. I'll just tell you, you could probably guess. Guess how many I am statements there are in John's Gospel? Anybody want to take a guess? It's a number that comes up a lot. 7. Yes, 7. There are 7 I am statements in John's Gospel, and there are 7 signs that Jesus performs in his Gospel. One of those I am statements was where Jesus said, "I am the door." So I'm pretty sure we're supposed to be connecting that statement of Jesus with this. The door to what? Well, here he's a door to heaven. Who's the one saying, "Come in"? Jesus. There's a door standing open. And this same Jesus had said to John, back when he was walking around on earth, "I'm the door." He goes on another time and says, "I am the door of the sheep." In other words, I'm the one letting the sheep in. So here we are. A door standing open in heaven. And there's a lot more in your notes. We could go on and on and on. I got to tell you this part. If you read the end of Revelation 21 in the new creation, it's described like a big city called the New Jerusalem. And there are gates to the city. And only the people who were believers in Jesus, who followed him, are allowed inside the city. But then it tells you the gates to the city are always open. They're probably thinking, what does that mean? We'll come back in 3 years when we get to the end of Revelation and we'll talk about it. All right? I have no idea how long this series is going to be. All right, so I'm just saying, if you want to have some fun, go read Revelation 21, and you'll just notice the gates are always open. And if you connect it to some Old Testament passages, the gates of God's city, the gates are called salvation. And at the end of Revelation, the salvation gates are always open. Interesting. We'll get to it later. Soon. I don't mean soon the way John did, but anyway. All right, so he says, "Come up here." Okay, so John's like, all right, I get to go to heaven. This is crazy. You'd be freaking out. Yes? I mean, you'd be happy, but you'd be pretty nervous too. If I was John, I'd be thinking, wait, does this mean I got to die? Right? I have to die to go to heaven, right? So, okay, so he's going to be called up. Now, I need to say this. Probably could avoid saying it, but I got to. This phrase right here, there are some who, for some reason, teach that this is the rapture of the church. And that, I'm sorry, that just doesn't make sense here. The church is not mentioned right here. John is the one being told to come up so that he can look around and he can write down what he sees. Okay, so this isn't talking about everybody going up. Okay, this is just talking about John. All right, just want to point that out in case you see somebody on YouTube or Facebook saying that. That's not what this is talking about. All right, so we good on that? Okay, now this one right here is the subject of a lot of debate. So he's about to show John what will take place after this. Now the after this refers to the first vision, and he's now going to get a new set of vision. And so I'm going to tell you what's going to take place after this. And he's about to be carried in the Spirit up to heaven. There's a lot of debate about how long is after this. How long after what John sees are these things going to happen? That's where most of your Revelation debates fall. The stuff that John is about to see, is that in our future, or was it in John's future but our past? That's where all the debate happens. We're not getting into any of that tonight, but just letting you know, you're going to see a whole paragraph about that in your notes. We're going to get to that later. All right, we'll talk about the debates, but not tonight. We want to just go to heaven tonight. Is that okay with y'all? There's no debates up there. Did y'all know that? We're not about to read about elders who, well, are you premillennial or are you postmillennial? And when do you think the rapture is going to happen? I think it's this. None of that's happening up there. Here's a hint. Maybe it shouldn't be happening down here either. Anyway, all right. Soapbox over there. Okay. Verse 2. We made it all the way through one verse in all that time. Aren't you excited about this? And at once I was in the Spirit. Okay. Remember, vision has just started. I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne stood in heaven. Okay? So you're standing on Patmos. You see a door open into heaven, and then you're carried in the Spirit. And when you get up there, you see a throne. And there's one seated on the throne. And he who sat there had the appearance of jasper and carnelian. And around the throne was a rainbow. It had the appearance of an emerald. It's like an emerald-ish rainbow. Now, when we read this, we're like, I don't even know how to picture this stuff. Well, John felt the same way. He's writing down what he saw. He's not trying to make sense out of all of it for us. He's just writing down what he saw. Because remember, Jesus in chapter 1 said, I want you to write down the things you have seen, the things that are going on right now, and the things that are going to happen after this. Just write down what you see. Okay? So I'm convinced that there are parts of Revelation that John didn't fully understand. He's just writing down what he saw. The reason why I think that is because I'm a student of church history, and I've read a lot of stuff, writings from people who knew John, and they're still confused about some parts of Revelation. So that tells me that not even John was going around saying, here's exactly what all this means. Because John wasn't told to say what everything means. He was told to write down what he saw. Does that make sense? Okay? So I want to make you feel better about being confused about Revelation. You ever been confused reading Revelation? Yes, all of us, you admit it. You are. Okay? I think John might have been not completely clear on what all of it meant, but he wrote it all down. And the people who were friends with John, who lived longer than John, didn't know all of it either. So we can just be okay. We don't have to have it all figured out. If Polycarp, who was a student of John, didn't have it all figured out, I think it's safe to say none of us in here are going to figure it all out. Yes? Okay, we can get a good idea. We can study and learn, but we probably shouldn't be dogmatic about what we think. We should probably say, it kind of looks like this, but I could be wrong. We just have to admit that. I think if more people like me would just admit that, we'd probably do better in the church. All right, that was another sermon. Here we go. So he's in the Spirit, and he sees a throne. and one seated on the throne, and there's all these jewels and emerald-looking rainbow and all this stuff, and all of that is connected in the Old Testament. So, like I said, in Mount Sinai, there's all these jewels. By the way, if you go back to Genesis chapter 2 and read the description of the Garden of Eden, it talks about these rivers. There's a river that splits into 4 rivers, and it talks about gold and some jewels like onyx stone, stuff like that. Some of that stuff is on the breastplate of the priest in Exodus, and it ends up again all the way through the Bible. Okay, so all this stuff is connected. So John is seeing something that people in the Old Testament have seen. The elders and Moses saw it when they were on Mount Sinai. Ezekiel in Ezekiel chapter 1, when he gets a vision of God's throne, he sees a rainbow. So this is not brand new information, is what I'm getting at. This has an entire history through the Old Testament. Okay, when people get to peer into where God is sitting in heaven, they tend to see almost exactly the same thing, even though these people never met each other. So it's not like they met together and said, okay, let's make sure we get our story straight. Okay, Moses never met Ezekiel. They lived 1,000 years apart, right? John never met Ezekiel. Okay, so they're not colluding to make up a good story. They never met, but they wrote down the same thing. Isn't that interesting? So, okay, so next verse. And around the throne were 24 thrones, and seated on the thrones were 24 elders. Now, the Greek word for elder here is presbyteros. It's where we get the word for Presbyterian, presbyter, and it's the word for elder. And a lot of times that gets turned into a fancy title, like a church authority title. In the scripture, it really just means an older person who's farther along. So when it talks about elders being appointed in the church in the New Testament, it's talking about people who aren't new believers. They're people who are elders in the faith. They've got some age on them, not only like physically, but spiritually. And those are the people that you want to have in positions that help you make decisions, right? Now, we've turned it into these fancy titles and kind of messed the whole thing up. But so these are, what John sees is he sees 24 thrones around God's throne and old dudes sitting on them, right? So he's seeing humans in heaven, which for a Jew was weird in his mind. So he knows something's changed here. Now, there's a lot of debate about what these 24 elders are. Now, remember, this is a vision. He is seeing things that symbolize something. Remember, I talked about what the word sign means in Revelation. It's just like almost like what we mean by road signs. The sign tells you about something, but the sign isn't that thing, right? It's pointing to that thing. So he's seeing these things, and they're symbolizing something. So there's a lot of debate about this. I think our best guess on what the 24 elders are is 12 of them represent the 12 tribes of Israel. The other 12 represent the Gentiles. So these represent all the believers, Jews and Gentiles. I think that's probably close, if not correct, okay? So this is about our best guess. And you can read all kinds of scholars, and they'll all say this is about the best guess we have because John never explains this, okay? Now, the reason why we guess that is because Jesus once told his 12 disciples in Matthew somewhere, in your notes I've got it, Matthew 19. He told his disciples that in the new creation, that they would sit on 12 thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel. So that's where we get the idea that maybe half of these guys are the 12 thrones that the apostles are going to be on, and the other 12 represent everybody who's not Jewish, who believe in Jesus. Okay? Now let's check out their clothing. All right, they're clothed in white garments. Sound familiar? This gets threaded all the way through Revelation. White garments represent purity or righteousness. They're also priestly garments. If you go read the priestly garments in Exodus 28, you'll find out that they have these white garments. And there's other colors that are kind of added to it, but it's white garments. Okay, so these 24 elders, they're sitting on thrones, which means they're judges. We're going to learn that next week when we get to chapter 5. But they're kind of like dressed like priests. Now, why is that important? And here's why I say priest. They have golden crowns on their heads. Did you know the high priest in the Old Testament had a gold crown on his head? And on the forehead of that crown, it said, holy to the Lord, or holy to Yahweh. Kadosh, Kadosh, what's the Hebrew word for two? I don't know, because I don't have Hebrew down yet. Anyway, holy to Yahweh. All right, we'll just speak English. I'll quit trying to impress everybody. All right. Y'all can laugh at some point. Zach, somebody laugh. So they have crown. They look just like high priests sitting on thrones. And that crown with Yahweh's name on it on the forehead, that's going to come up again in Revelation. You remember you've probably heard this part about Revelation, the mark of the beast, where it's on their forehead or on their hand. Okay, that's the counterfeit for what we're reading about here. God's name is on their head. In Revelation, the people who are following the beast, the evil one, have his name on their head, but God's people have God's name on their head. These are symbols. Okay, we're not literally going to have Yahweh tattooed on our forehead. All right, some of you are getting nervous about that. I especially wouldn't want that right now with a sunburn. Huh? Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's pretty funny. the God logo. All right. So this is a theme that gets presented here that comes up later. Okay, so they've got the high priestly crown. You'd have to know your Old Testament to know it says Yahweh on it. Okay, John doesn't tell you that. John assumes you know your Old Testament. Isn't that a wonderful idea to have? To assume people would know their Bibles. Just saying. Okay? That's why John doesn't explain everything, because he thinks you have an Old Testament. You can go look it up. All right? So we got these high priest, judge-like figures who represent all the believers in the world. Now from the throne came flashes of lightning and rumblings, so it's like quaking. Peals of thunder, because you know when there's lightning, there's thunder. Not all the time, but most of the time. And before the throne were burning 7 torches of fire. Ooh, right? This is a scary image a little bit. I mean, this is the Mount Sinai image. Remember, God was in fire on top of the mountain? Voice like a trumpet. This is all connected. Okay, so there's thunder and lightning just like Mount Sinai. There's fire. And these 7 torches of fire. Now here's something cool. John's going to explain something for us. Okay? When you read Revelation a lot, you will grow to love it when he does that, because he almost never does. When he does, you're like, oh, he told us what that was, right? Or maybe I'm just so much of a Bible nerd, I get excited about that kind of thing. Okay, so I've got to get better at this. Look what he says here. Which are 7 torches of fire. We don't even need to debate about what it is. It's the 7 spirits of God. But then that raises another question. What the heck are the 7 spirits of God? We thought he had one of those. We call him the Holy Spirit, right? Well, there's really only one place in your Old Testament that mentions that God has 7 spirits, or 7 kinds of spirits. And it's in Isaiah. Scroll down. I keep going past my notes here. Isaiah 11:2. And the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him. This is talking about the anointed one, the Messiah. The Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him. The Spirit of wisdom and understanding and counsel and might and knowledge and the Spirit of the fear of the Lord. 7. That's the only place I can find where 7 different spirits are mentioned in reference to God's Spirit. Interesting. So he sees 7 torches of fire, and these represent those 7 spirits of God, which all have to do, when you go back through that list, it's wisdom, understanding, counsel, might, knowledge. There's a lot of wisdom type stuff here, right? That's what seems to be, that's what the Spirit likes to do most, is help us to understand, help us to know God more, right? So he sees these 7 spirits. Now, man, I always have to decide how much not to say. If you go to Zechariah 4, chapter 4, he also mentions 7 torches of fire that are on a lampstand. It's a lampstand with 7 torches of fire on them. So all this stuff's connected. Remember, I told you this was full of the Old Testament, and I'm not joking. Okay, so the next thing he sees, and before the throne there was, as it were, a sea of glass like crystal. Okay, so notice what John's doing here. It kind of sounds like he's saying, this is my best description I could make for you. Looks like a sea of glass. Is he saying there's a literal sea of glass? He's saying what he saw looked like a sea of glass. That's important. When you're reading Revelation, remember, he's describing what he's seeing, and he's describing it the best way he can in human terms. But if you went up there and saw it, you probably wouldn't even know how to describe it, right? So, okay, because, you've never been up there. It's very different there. So you just have to give it your best guess. That's what John's doing here. That's why our English Bible says, there was, as it were, like a sea of glass, right? You see what John's doing here? Okay. And around the throne, on each side of the throne, are 4 living creatures, full of eyes in front and behind. That sound weird to you? It's supposed to. It's supposed to be scary. Now, we'll dig in. I'll explain what these are in just a minute. Okay, let's read what they look like. The first living creature looks like a lion. The second living creature like an ox. And the third living creature with the face of a man. And the fourth living creature like an eagle in flight. Weird, huh? Mm-hmm. These are what the Old Testament calls cherubim. You've probably called them cherubim or cherubim. It's cherubim. This is the same creature that God put at the entrance to the garden when Adam and Eve got exiled. It says he put a cherubim at the entrance of the garden. Here's what these things are. In the ancient world, especially in this area of the world, and really pretty much all over the world, no matter what religion you go to, they all seem to think that there are these hybrid creatures that are around whoever their God is. And they're like guardians of sacred space. They keep you from walking into that God's presence because you'd probably die if you walked into God's presence, right? The Israelites were no different. And by the way, if Yahweh is the creator of the universe, which we believe he is, and all these other religions are basically rebellious religions, but they have a lot of the same imagery, it seems to indicate we're all seeing the same thing. It's not the same God, but it all came from the same thing. It's just taking what we know in Scripture to be true and then twisting it for their own, right? So I'll give you an example. If you go to Babylon, which today is Iraq, if you go there and you go to any of the ruins that they have of ancient temples or go to the museums there, you'll see these massive statues of like hybrid creatures. They're like part animal with a human face. You've seen pictures of this? I should have got some pictures of it. You see these everywhere. In Egypt, you see the same thing. You see look half like a lion and half like a bird and all this kind of stuff. So they have wings, but they have feet and hooves and then a human face, right? That's the kind of thing this is. That's what a cherubim is. They're guardians of sacred space. They are not guarding God. Get it? He doesn't need guarding. they're keeping humans from walking into God's presence and being killed by it because our human bodies can't handle that much glory, right? So that's what they do. So he puts a cherubim at the garden, and then later on Ezekiel, if you read Ezekiel chapter 1, he sees these same creatures, and his descriptions are very similar. There are minor differences. When Ezekiel sees them, they have 4 wings. When John sees them, they have 6. So there are minor differences, but pretty much they're the same thing. And they're called the living creatures, which is a Hebrew way of describing animal-like creatures. Okay? So John's seeing some weird stuff. Yes? Yeah. He says, and the 4 living creatures, each of them with 6 wings, are full of eyes all around. I can't imagine what that looks like, right? There's what's the name of that comic book Bible thing, Marty? Huh? Kingstone, yeah. They ought to draw this stuff. I mean, they do pretty good with some of the stuff they do. But if you were to draw this animal thing that we're reading about, it would look crazy. Yes? Eyes all over it and human, animal looking. The point is, when you saw this, you would not go any further. Right? So if you showed up if Adam and Eve decided, I think we're going to go back in the garden. It sucks out here. We're going to go back in the garden. When you got to the entrance and you saw a cherubim with a flaming sword, you'd be like, nah, we'll just try harder out here. Yeah, well, maybe we'll pray. We'll see if God will let us back in. We're not just going to walk past that thing, right? That's the point, okay? Now, these 4 living creatures, they can talk. Shocking, you know. And within, they've got these eyes all around and within. I don't even know how that works, but and day and night, they never cease to say. So day and night, they say this, never ceasing. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. Now, if you read Revelation a lot, that should sound familiar because it's in chapter 1, verse 8. John, when he's doing his little prologue, greeting, introduction, he says that God says, I am the Alpha and the Omega, says the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. So, where do you think John got that phrase to put at the beginning of Revelation? Well, he heard it in heaven. If I got to go to heaven and I heard their worship song, and then I get to write it down, I'd probably start my book by going, hey, guess what? He's God Almighty, who was and is to come. People think, wow, that's a good line, John. Yeah, well, I heard it. I heard this song, right? And they never stop singing this song. They're 88-1 in heaven. They just sing it over and over and over and over again, right? They never stop doing this. Now, what does this mean? Well, they're calling him holy 3 times. To say something 3 times was big in the Jewish world, or to ask someone the same thing 3 times would have been offensive. But to say something 3 times in someone's honor was like the highest honor you could give them. So they are giving the highest honor by calling God holy, holy, holy. The word holy, we tend to think that word means morally perfect. It includes that, but that's not the base level meaning of that word. The basic meaning of the word holy is different, completely unique, set apart from all others. So to call God holy is to say there's no one like you. Make sense? Okay? So when God says be holy as he is holy, he's saying you be set apart and unique from the world around you. Just like I'm unique from all other spiritual beings, you be unique from all other humans. That's what it means to be holy. That includes obeying him and being morally upstanding. But that's not the only meaning of that word. The meaning of the word is to be set apart. So they're saying, there's no one like you, there's no one like you, there's no one like you, God Almighty, who was in the past and is now and is in the future. He's eternal. That's what that phrase means. Okay? So you got 4 really weird-looking creatures worshiping day and night. It's kind of cool. Yeah? And whenever the living creatures give glory and honor and thanks to him who is seated on the throne, who lives forever and ever. Take note of how many times he's going to say who lives forever and ever. The 24 elders fall down before him who is seated on the throne and worship him who lives forever and ever. He keeps telling us that part. Notice that? They cast their crowns. Remember those crowns with Yahweh's name on it that the priests wore? They fall down and they take their crowns and throw them before the throne, and they say, "Worthy are you." Notice we've been singing a song, "Worthy are you," lately. This is where that song comes from. Worthy are you, our Lord and God, to receive glory and honor and power. Why? For you created all things, and by your will they existed and were created. They're worshiping him as the creator. Now here's why I think they're throwing their crowns down at the throne. They're saying, you gave us this crown. It's got your name on it. The only reason we got it is because of what you've done. And we return it back. You deserve it, not us. That's worship. Worship is not, let's come and sing some songs, and I hope they sing songs I like. I mean, that's cool that you like songs, but we're not singing to you. Can I just be honest about that? I love you, but we don't get up here on Sunday and sing for you. That's why if you notice on Sundays, when I start off with a prayer, lately I've been saying, God, we hope that you enjoy this. That's who we're singing to. We forget that sometimes. We think that we're doing this to make ourselves feel good. And worship does make us feel good. That's okay. But we cannot forget who we're singing to. He is the audience, not us. So no matter what song we're singing, if it's a biblically correct song and it lifts up his name, it doesn't matter what the song sounds like. And we should do our best. And, we shouldn't just get up here and sing off key. But he's the audience. And the Psalms say that God inhabits the praises of his people. He inhabits. What does that mean? He shows up. He hangs out when his people are praising him. That's why every Sunday we invite his Spirit to come hang out. And I hope you enjoy what we sing to you, Father. Come hang out with us today. Let us know you are here. It's good, isn't it? That's the point. The point of worship is not a concert. The point of worship is not to impress everybody. The point of worship is to bless God because he's holy, 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 and he's worthy, worthy, worthy. And he made everything. He deserves our worship. And whatever he's given us, for these guys it was a golden crown, we return it back. God has given us life, yes? So what do you think he wants in return? Our life. He gave us life, and we give it back to him. Down here, we're in the rehearsal stage. We're practicing. So what we do down here on earth is we practice giving our life back to him every day. A little more. Give more of my life to him every day. I want to grow in this of giving myself away, denying myself and following him, giving my life back to him. I don't want to hold on to my life because if I do that, I'll lose it, Jesus said. But if I give up my life for his sake, I'll actually find out what life really is. That's what Jesus taught. Remember that? If you want to save your life, you'll lose it. But if you give it up to me, for me, then you will find life. So give up my life is how I find life. It's upside down. That's the kingdom. All right? Ooh, that was a good sermon there. I hope y'all enjoyed that. So they fall down, they cast their crowns, and they call him worthy. Now, what are we supposed to get out of this? Because this is a pretty strange vision, isn't it? I mean, when you thought when I said tonight we were going to go to heaven, you probably weren't picturing really scary, like horror movie creatures. Like this is Stranger Things or something, right? I don't know if y'all watch that show, scare the crap out of you. But anyway, You weren't thinking like we go to heaven, there's these scary creatures and old guys sitting on thrones, right? It's like the old Baptist church with the big throne chairs. You remember that? Probably shouldn't have said that. I just thought that was funny, you know. I preached, quick story. Um, my roommate was at an old school Baptist church in college, and he was going to be gone, so he asked me if I would fill in for him. So I had to ask my church. Back then, I was in a small church in the metropolis of Eridu, and I had to take off that Sunday so I could go preach for him to take off a Sunday. So anyway, so I'm at this church, and they've got the three big throne chairs on the stage, huge chairs. I don't know who has to move those things, but good gracious, they're massive. And I'm sitting on the front row because that's kind of where I want to be. And the guy, like the music minister, says, "Well, don't you want to sit in the chair on the stage?" And I was like, "Not really. I'd rather just be down here. I don't really need a throne, you know." And he's like, "Well, our pastor sits there." I was like, "That's his seat. I'll sit down here." And this guy made it very clear he really wanted me to sit in that seat. So, not wanting to be rude, I got up and I sat down in the seat. But what he didn't tell me was he was about to stand this close in front of me and lead the singing. So I sat in a throne in a Baptist church staring this close at an old guy's butt for the entire worship service, and then I had to get up and preach. I don't know why I told that story. It was the old guy on thrones thing. That was it. Anyway, you need to laugh. So there you go. But they were nice people. I just didn't want to sit in their throne chairs. So what are we supposed to learn from this weird vision? John gets to see all this crazy stuff going on. And by the way, I skipped this. I just want you to think about reading this. This idea of there being a throne that God sits on and then thrones set up around it is not new information. It's from Daniel chapter 7. If you go read Daniel 7, it'll sound very familiar to you. Daniel gets to look into heaven, and he sees one on a throne who he calls the Ancient of Days, which means the Eternal One, God the Father. He's sitting on a throne, and he also says there are thrones around that throne. And this is where he sees the Son of Man coming with the clouds to the throne and gets presented to the Ancient of Days. And then God gives the Son of Man an everlasting kingdom. That coming with the Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven, that's what it means. He's being presented to God and receiving a kingdom that will last forever. That's the whole theme of Revelation. Revelation chapter 1, verse 7. Behold, he is coming with the clouds, and everyone in the land will see him, even those who crucified him or pierced him. All right? It's the whole theme of the book. All right? So he's seeing this whole thing. Now, what are we supposed to do with this? Well, I got an idea. In heaven, what we just learned is that all the focus is on God. Yes? The crazy, horror movie creatures worship all day and night, holy, holy, holy. All the focus is on God. The 24 elders, when the creatures get done with their song, which they don't ever get done because they're all day and night, but every time they say that, the elders get off their thrones and fall down and give their crowns back. And this is going on all the time. All the focus is on the one who sits on the throne. Yes? So God is the center of everything up there in heaven. I think we can all agree that's what this passage is telling us. Now, what does that mean for us? True disciples of Jesus should do on earth what is being done in heaven. All of our focus in this life should be centered on God. So what we just learned is what goes on in heaven. Why don't we just do that here? Make sense? Okay, if that's what they're doing up there, how about we just do that here? We just put all our focus on Him. Now, what that doesn't mean everybody go quit your job and just stay home all day singing the same song over and over again and go get a crown from Burger King and write Yahweh on it and throw it down. That's not what I mean. What I mean is with your everyday life, be focused on Him. Focus your life around Him. That's where life actually happens. So still go to work. Still go out on the boat and get sunburned. Still do whatever it is you do. Ride motorcycles or play music or play sports. Do what you do, but make sure your life is centered on God and His Word. Because His Word is how you find out who He is and what He wants. Not what He wants for Him, what He wants for you. So, that's what I learned from Revelation chapter 4. Man, if that's how it is in heaven, where everybody's focused on Him all the time, that's what we should do here. Everything we do, we focus it on Him. Not just saying the blessing before we eat, but all day long having conversations. When you're driving down the road, when you sit down, when you lie down, when you get up, when you walk along the road, Deuteronomy says, just always be talking about what He's done. That's how the ancient Israelites were intended to do this. And that's how the church, God's people, new covenant people, were intended to do the same. All of our focus centered on Him. And if we would just figure out how to do that, things would be very different for us. Now, would it change the whole world tomorrow? There's always going to be evil people. There's always going to be evil things. There's always going to be evil nations of which you might be living in. Yes? You're living in an evil nation. I hope you realize that. But if we, God's people, could just center our lives on Him and be committed to Him, our lives will be better. And when it's better, it causes people outside of God's people to look in and go, okay, why aren't you freaking out about what's on the news right now? Why is that? Why aren't you outraged about such and such? Why didn't you respond to them on Facebook the way I would have responded? And you can say, well, it's because none of that bothers me because I'm centered on Christ. And Jesus said, this is good right here. Jesus said, come to me when you're weary and heavy laden. I'll give you rest. Eirene in Greek, rest and peace, it's the same word. You'll be peaceful. You'll be surrounded by absolute insanity, but you'll be at peace. It won't bother you. We can figure that out. We'll be a lot better off. So that's what I think we learn from this passage. So, how about some homework? Next week, we're going to come back here. We're going to talk about Revelation chapter 5. So read chapter 5. It's 14 verses. It's really good. You'll like it. And it's very similar to chapter 4. Now, we've separated it from chapter 4 and chapter 5, but John didn't do that. Some guy in the 1600s did that. Okay, there were no chapters. This is all the same vision, remember? So this is all connected. So some of the things you read in chapter 5 are going to sound familiar because it's all the same scene. Okay, so we just read like the introduction to the scene of heaven. And it's going to go further. The story's going to keep going in the next chapter. Now, what I want you to do, if you're a committed Christian, you do your homework. I want you to read chapter 5, and then I want you to go read Zechariah 5. I bet you never read Zechariah. It's an interesting book. It is good for something. Okay? Those weird Old Testament prophets actually have a lot to say and help us understand the New Testament. So go read Zechariah 5 and read 2 verses from Ezekiel. Just 2 verses. That's it. This is not that hard. Okay? So read 4 verses in Zechariah and then go read Ezekiel 2. And you're going to notice, if you just keep going back and forth, And this kind of sounds like the same thing, or at least it sounds like the same kind of thing. So I'll give you a hint. There's a scroll mentioned in all three of these passages. What I want you to do is ask this question. This scroll in Revelation, based on these Old Testament passages, what kind of stuff are we going to expect this scroll to be about? Is it about good things, blessings, or is it about curses and woes? So just go read those passages and see which answer you come up with. Okay, because remember, in the covenant, the old covenant and the new one, there's blessings if you obey, and there's woes and curses if you disobey. So I wonder what this scroll is going to be about. So there's your homework. So go do that, and we'll come back next time.